Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Our folks, welcome back. Very excited to have back Edy Nathan. Edy, welcome.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
it. You're welcome. So Edy is a certified sex therapist and thought leader specializing in grief, trauma, and sexuality. She works with businesses, universities, and long-term care homes to help people understand how these areas filter through their lives and affect everything from creativity to productivity. Working together, she offers creative ways to deal with grief, trauma, and sexuality. Her book, It's Grief, The Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. She examines the emotional and devastating impact of loss and trauma. She has a new book she's working on, which we're going to be talking about today. But Edy, welcome back.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. So remind our listeners, before we get going here, where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I'm originally from Chicago and still have family there. And I'm currently a little bit of a gypsy. So sometimes you might find me in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and sometimes you might find me in Astoria, Queens in New York. And sometimes you might find me down south. So I'm bebopping around.
Awesome. So you have a new book you're working on. Before we get there, give our listeners kind of a sketch of how all this started for you. This interest, this passion.
Grief and the conversation of grief is not often an invited guest. And, we often, me included, will do everything to avoid it, push it down, and say, I am not dealing with this. But sadly, when I was 27 years old, I lost my partner, and I was going into the corporate world as a trainer. And when I lost my partner, realized, wow, I have no one to talk to. No one understands what I'm going through. And I then decided to do a deep dive into how not only could I heal, and I use heal, not healing, or heal to heal, not as a means of getting over, but learning to live with the loss in my life. And because of Paul's death, I just changed the whole trajectory of my life and became a therapist, and then realized, my gosh, people are coming in and they're grieving, but they're not just grieving about the loss of a loved one. Or if they are, you know what's happening? There's complications, and those complications are often because there's been trauma. So that led me to another deep dive, looking into trauma and complex trauma and how the duplicity of trauma and grief love to dance with one another. And as a therapist, realized, okay, so there's a whole sexual piece to this. So then became a sex therapist. And now I talk about the three things that people don't want to talk about: grief, sex, and trauma.
I was just thinking to myself, I mean, it's not just grief, but people don't want to talk about it, and sex too. So, all right. How is it that you are able to, and we're going to talk about the book, but we're bringing up all these things. How is it that you have the courage, the strength, the audacity, the willingness to explore these topics that many of us don't want to talk about?
Oh, we probably don't have enough time on this show to even go into that. Suffice it to say that I'm curious, and that I've had enough pain in my life that I don't want other people to have to walk around with a pain that they just keep swallowing. And what I've learned is that when you step into the pain, when you are curious about it, when you say, okay, I'm going to face you rather than swallow all that's going on, that it actually there's a mitigation of the
Hmm.
pain. And the reason that the first book is called The Dance of Self-Discovery is because it is a dance. And once the realization came, oh, you know what? I can't fight this because every time I fight it, it gets bigger. But let me partner with it and learn about it, be curious about it, which is a little bit about this next book, which I'm not ready to talk about here yet, but just to say that, oh, when we invite the grief in, when we invite the curiosity of what is going on here with this grief, with this trauma, with my sexual driver, and how has all of that been affected because of the losses in my life. And the book is not just about the loss of a loved one. It is about the losses that we have in our lives. And those losses
Hmm.
can also be the loss of the self.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on here, you, there's the project you're working on. How are we going to talk about that? What is it?
This is a brand new topic, and people have not heard of this in the context from which I, deliver it. Okay. So it's called sexual grief, and I'm calling it the sexual grief effect. The sexual grief effect is when someone has had a developmental sexual trauma. And developmental sexual trauma means anywhere on one's timeline, like they were unwanted or they had a really bad first sexual experience, or aging for men, erectile dysfunction for women, menopause, disabilities, the timeline just from birth until we're no
Hmm.
longer here. I look at that timeline as one piece of where sexual grief impacts one's ability to live fully. And it impacts the ability to have relationships. It impacts the ability to be in the body fully. What happens in the sexual grief effect is that it doesn't just hit the developmental piece, it also hits a piece when someone has been sexually traumatized from a predatory event. So I'm looking at both predatory events and developmental experiences. And what each of these events and experiences, what happens with them is they they cause one to feel as if they're held hostage and they can't live their lives fully, can't get a job, can't
Hmm.
learn, can't be intimate. And it takes away those primary passions or even the belief in oneself. And what this project is teaching people how to deal with the hostage taker, the sexual grief effect, and become their own hostage negotiators. And I know that using the word hostage right now, we're living in a world where hostage is a really tough word. But when talking to people who've got the developmental hits that I just talked about and the predatory events and the use of that word, it sounds like you feel like these events and experiences have left you feeling like you're a hostage. It's like a light bulb goes off. It's like,
Hmm.
you're talking directly to me because that's how I feel.
All right, let's get specific here. Give us an example of how these experiences or an experience might keep someone hostage, might keep them
Okay.
from living their lives in any manner of ways.
Okay. So let's look at the developmental piece first. The developmental piece might be religious sexual trauma. In a religious sexual trauma, it's a developmental hit because nobody is purposely wanting to hurt that child. But what they are teaching that child is to have shame about their bodies. Don't touch, don't be sexually, don't explore yourself. Don't allow yourself the freedoms to understand who you are in terms of your gender identity. And you become locked, you
Mhm.
become imprisoned. And so these many of these people who are coming out of these very religious cultural homes find themselves feeling that they've been held hostage. They've been told that, and these are true messages, that if they masturbate, they're either going to die or something's going to fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And those messages, when you're 4 and 6 and 9 and 10, stay with you. And so what happens is it's hard to explore, it's hard to understand the self. And the sexual driver shuts down. The sexual driver, though a Freudian term, I'm not using it in that way, but it is one's lust for life. And it's not just, I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about how you live.
Mm-hmm.
So what I help people do is say, okay, let me first understand that I'm going to label this. This is sexual grief. And it is the effect of the sexual grief. It's a natural response to what happened. I'm shut down. I'm stuck. I'm trapped. So they talk to the part of themselves that's stuck and trapped. That's perhaps the religious sexual trauma that's happened to them. And in talking to it, they first become curious, which is the first stage to a good hostage negotiation. I call it curiosity and awe. They then go into empathy, because it's really hard to have empathy to the thing that's hurt you or entrapped you. And so it is an empathy energy. And this is not linear, but we do start out with the curiosity and we do go to the empathy. And the third piece to this, and there's 6 altogether, but these major 3 pieces is developing a rapport and trust. And so you begin to really have these conversations with the part of you that is holding on to the sexual grief effect, this natural response, and you are finding ways out.
I can imagine as you're speaking how someone who's gone through that type of sexual trauma would kind of warden off that part of them, right? It's brought
That's
them
right.
so much potentially shame, they don't even want to talk about it. And you could think about other ways people would then deal with this part of themselves that's been closed off, right?
That's right.
Acting out, addictions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
Um, okay, so what about another example? That was,
So that's one example. And
let
I
me,
wanted
before
to
we,
go there.
hold on one second.
Sure.
How prevalent is that type of trauma?
I don't have a percentage, but it's more prevalent than we would think.
We would
And
think,
along the
yeah.
developmental timeline, we've got period poverty for young women who didn't know that they were going to have their periods, and sadly think upon getting their periods that they are bleeding to death. And what ends up happening is every month they go through that trauma, and their bodies, as you know, Bessel van der Kolk often talks about, keep the score, and they're just waiting. And because the trauma is not dealt with, and then if there actually is financial difficulties in being able to get the appliances or the things needed, you know, during their monthly periods, if they don't have the money to do it, oftentimes girls will miss school. And that's where the period poverty is also enhanced. And then we're talking about the shame. And the shame goes into, this is something that's happening to this young girl. And she's not prepared. And she loathes. She is really filled with self-loathing and disgust around something that should be beautiful. And there is the sexual grief effect. And she is held hostage by this every single month. And the women who finally deal with this, some gynecologists will help some of these women really deal with their shame around it, but often it's just disregarded. And women don't understand why they may accordingly have something called vaginismus, which is the clamping down of the vaginal muscles, and it makes penetration difficult, if not impossible. And sometimes there's something medically wrong, but
Hmm.
sometimes it's an emotional piece. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking this experience, it's just fraught with these landmines of silence and
that's
shame,
right. That's
and
right.
can't talk about it. And
That's right.
even in the doctor's office, if they even ask about it. So,
That's right.
okay.
So that's the developmental. If we look at predatory, we can look at any one scenario that is of a predatory nature. And I say predatory so that, anyone who's listening, will not necessarily feel the overwhelm of anything that I might describe. But
Hmm.
any kind of predatory event, which is not, it is a situation that does not happen by choice. A predatory event is something that is done to you, and you have not made a choice about this. And it happens to boys, it happens to girls, it happens to people who are older, but there is usually an age range where it is most prevalent, which is often between the ages of 7 and 16.
Hmm.
And those predatory events cause so much harm in self esteem, in desire, in learning, in cognitive abilities, in focus. And children are often misdiagnosed. Oh, they've got ADD. Oh, they're depressed. And they're just medicated rather than actually doing a deeper dive and asking the questions. Has anyone ever touched you inappropriately? Did anything ever happen to you? Because the doctors don't want to know, and they don't want to do the deeper dive often. I'm not blasting doctors,
Sure, sure.
but and certainly our school systems, the teachers are supposed to, be aware, but oftentimes if there are, it will come to multiple absences versus really tracking something in terms of learning within the classroom.
So, from an experience like that, and the one you mentioned previously, obviously there's the trauma and everything that it involves, but we're also bringing in the grief piece here. So,
Yeah.
how does that come into play with what you're just talking about now?
Well, when anybody is held hostage, there's grief. What's interesting is the APA, the American Psychological Association, did a big study on hostage survivors. And if you look at the list of words, the descriptions that the hostage survivors de- depicted as how they felt, it absolutely aligns with anyone who is a developmental sexual grief
Hmm.
survivalist, or a predatory, sexual has had a predatory event that they've survived. So what we're seeing is that the grief is very much aligned with anyone whose grief is a big piece, just across the board, for any hostage survivalist. And I say survivalist because I think that we use the word survivor so often that it
Hmm.
loses its meaning. And so what I will do often is I will find different ways to express what's going on. And a survivalist means that you're standing up in the face of the event or the experience, and you're moving with it. And
Hmm.
it's not something you get over, it is something that you learn to integrate, and then you learn about who you are, and you grow your personal identity. You grow your sense of self, and your sexual driver, that driver that allows you to have that lust for life, that hunger to learn, comes alive again.
Easier said than done, right? I mean,
Oh, it is. It is. It is.
yeah.
It's I'm not saying that this is easy. I am saying
No, of
though,
course not.
and that's why I've been grappling, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, with the idea of what is healing, because I think that so often in my world as a clinician, that the word healing has meant to some it's all better,
Hmm.
and it's not all better. It's right.
Right. Right. I think, yeah. I mean, I think for me, it depends on the the person and their situation. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind after you said that was, well, healing to me means, so about a year and a half ago, I went through a divorce that was really hard. And for me, healing in that context would mean not being held hostage to the weight of that event and everything it means to me, because I still am.
That's
I very much still am. I'm still dealing with the X, Y, and Z of the intricacies of that coming out of nowhere and dealing with that on a day-to-day basis and everything it means. So, healing wouldn't mean that it never happened or I would
no.
be never
Or
have
you
to think
forget
about
it.
it.
Oh,
Right.
I'm healed. I've
Right.
forgotten. No,
Right.
right?
But I think, we each have maybe different gauges at different stages of our life where
That's
that's
right.
going to be defined differently.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the sexual grief effect will consistently be defined and redefined. The notion here is giving people the agency
Mm,
to have the knowledge to say, oh, I'm going to be my own negotiator here, and I'm going to negotiate with the things that take me down. And
mhm,
what's taken me down right now is this memory or this pop in memory. And I'm going to take a time in moment. And this time in moment is to be curious or to have a little bit of empathy, because I'm being really hard on myself right now. Because I think, because going out on a date or having, going out with friends or going for that job interview, I'm having a hard time believing that I can do this. So
mm,
let me just stop for a moment, have a little bit of empathy, be curious about, okay, so what's the messaging here? Okay, I'm going to negotiate with my hostage taker right now because these are old messages. And
mhm,
that message doesn't have to hurt me right now. I can deal with it. I can talk with you. I can be curious with you. And I can say, I, I have another part of me that's developing and growing. And that's the part of me that I'm going to nurture right now. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to ignore the
mhm.
fear or ignore the fact that my mouth has just like gone dry and my throat is like just not saying the words. I'm going to remember what I've gone through, who I am in this moment. And if I can't do something, that's okay.
Mhm.
And that's also negotiating with the hostage taker.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's so powerful. The idea that there can even be healing within these
Yeah.
contexts for many of us is like, what?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I can have
Right?
an agency. I can be curious about that. I can't
That's
even think about that. I cannot imagine. I did not experience any type of sexual developmental trauma that we're talking about here, predatory and so forth. To me, I can't imagine. I was bullied when I was a kid, which did jack me up and impact my life in many negative
absolutely.
ways. But the idea that, you're presenting this, I can see a lot of us, a lot of people, I can even feel, wait a minute, I can look at it in this way. I
Yeah.
can be curious about this and negotiate. That to
That's right.
me is that's mind blowing.
And it's not instead of any work that anyone is doing here. Okay. This is a yes and. So I don't want anyone to think, oh, well, Edie's talking about this and she's saying this is the way to do this. No, I'm saying whatever you're doing, keep doing it. This is
Right.
a yes and.
Right.
You becoming your negotiator and having the agency to say, you know what? I'm going to be curious. As terrified as I am, I'm going to be curious. Hey, okay, right now my mouth has gone dry. And the minute your mouth goes dry, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to ignore this, because then you know what? The mouth goes dry and then you start to sweat because you've ignored it. And then the anxiety starts and then the heart starts pumping. Then you go into like, you're freezing, you're flying away. And it's just all of the reactions to trauma occur. What if you start to identify, I know what my tells are: dry mouth, I start to get itchy. I start to think about something that has nothing to do with what's going on. If those are my tells of I am about to really not feel good, I'm just going to start to have a pop in memory. That's the moment of, oh, wait a minute, hold on, let me be curious. Okay, dry mouth, what's going on with you right now?
Mhm.
What are you afraid of? I'm right here with you. I'm going to just get a glass of water. I'm going to make sure that my swallow reflexes are working. Or I'm going to do something like this, where I'm going to concentrate and refocus on just trying to feel my thumbprint. And you are actually negotiating in that moment.
In the sense that you're what? Your prefrontal cortex is online. You were
Oh yeah, your prefront, absolutely.
aware.
Your prefrontal cortex is online. You're usually what's happening when there's a trauma response. Your brain is in freeze mode. Your prefrontal cortex is saying danger, 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 and you're like, yeah, I gotta run, I gotta run. But before that happens, there are often tells that happen in the body. And if we become curious about what those tells are, whether it's dry mouth, I used to have horrific anxiety. Uh, my sense of smell would become stronger when I was about to go into a really bad panic attack.
Hmm.
And I started to track it. And I started to be curious about, oh, I'm starting to smell onions. Like, that's really strange. Oh, I'm about to have a panic attack, because I could track it. And that's where curiosity comes in. And what I found is if I paid attention and I was curious, and I could then say, oh, okay, so let me just breathe. Let me ground myself. Let me say to myself, what is causing the panic is something that I'm imagining, and it's really not happening now. And I can do something about this. And that curiosity versus I'm ignoring this. Because whenever I tried to ignore the panic, you know what happened? It got bigger and
Mm.
bigger and bigger. But if I said, oh, wait a minute, it's happening right now, I'm going to pay attention. And I became curious. And at that point, I wasn't even talking about these negotiation strategies. I was able to actually find my own agency to calm myself down.
I want to remind everyone we're speaking with Edy Nathan. Edy, as we get ready to close down here, so what in a broad sense, what are we talking about here for our listeners?
Broad sense, the pain that you're in, if you are in pain because of a developmental trauma along your timeline or a predatory event, the natural response you have is yours and you have a right to it. But if it's taking you down and interrupting your life, there is a way to interrupt its agency by creating your own agency.
Hmm.
And it can't hold you hostage anymore when you learn the negotiation strategies that I have available for you. And if you go onto my website, sexualgrief.com, you'll find the 6 strategies to becoming a hostage negotiator.
Awesome. All right, Edy, we'll have that listed up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Love having you on here.
Love being here. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your passion. And you have this way about you that is, I get off the call with you and I'm like, that's the person I want to have as my therapist, Anyway, I really appreciate you being here. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.